Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Gulsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science. Well, here we are again, ready to talk about some poults. So, Eva, we are glad to have you on the show. I think your name has been mentioned in several different contexts, but you are the field coordinator overseeing the field work with the poult facility. So we thought it would be really valuable to have you on and give you an opportunity to tell people other things about that. I know we've covered some things, but folks are messaging us a lot, telling us they want to hear more and more and more about it. And I can understand why they'd feel that way, because that's the way I feel about it. And, you know, I think it's fun to talk about all the cool things that are going on, and things are changing fast. So we should have plenty of opportunity to do that. So thanks for coming to talk to us about that. I know you have just met Will, so maybe I'll turn it over to Will and let you start. How you'd like, Will.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Eva. Again, nice to meet you. From talking to Marcus, I understand that you were involved in, other similar types of bird research before coming to the poult facility. So I wanted to start out by asking, how did you get qualified to come be the field manager on this project?
Yeah, I've had so many different experiences in so many different areas. So I've worked in Montana on songbird, radio tracking study, but probably the most, as well as radio tracking of kestrels in Florida too. So that relates to our trapping season. But when it comes to poults specifically and rearing them, I was an intern at the National Aviary in Pittsburgh, and I had this unique opportunity to shadow the breeding center leader, and she essentially is a absolute expert in the aspect of specifically monitoring eggs and kind of creating the perfect scenario for them to be able to be successful. And so by watching her and how intense that she was in monitoring their humidity and what they're doing inside of the egg and candling super frequently, we were able to kind of come up with this perfect system of, what are our milestones for the wild turkey egg, and when do we need to change our settings, and how quickly do we need to act on these things, and how sensitive is that overall process? So I was able to watch her closely and see all of those specific insights that we should be paying attention to, and that really prepared me to get these wild eggs from wild scenarios and get them into our incubators.
That's really cool. And Marcus, you're really fortunate to find somebody with that skill set.
I know.
I mean, golly, talk about 1 in a million. But before we start talking about turkeys, Eva, do you have any cool stories or highlights you would want to share from your time working at the aviary?
Sure.
Or maybe something that was just, what you enjoyed the most or you found fascinating during that experience?
Yeah, I mean, taking it back to eggs specifically, something I find so fascinating is how perfectly every single thing has to work out. Not only do you need to have a fertilized egg, but that needs to be shelf stable at first, and then you've got to trigger incubation. And then once that has begun, that has to be consistent for, 28 days or however long that cycle is. And it's just incredible to be able to watch them go from an orange yolk versus the rest of the yellow fluid in the egg to becoming an embryo that undulates in the egg, and then the vessel's growing, and then suddenly you can see turkey feet in there. But what I learned so amazingly from Bree Crane at the aviary is that every single part of that process is so sensitive. And if the bird is not perfectly positioned, if it doesn't absorb the yolk completely, if there's not enough moisture in the air during hatching, if the head doesn't pip into the internal air cell and then be able to access the outside air, the probability of that egg hatching will significantly decrease. So it's
Wow.
just incredible how sensitive it is. And I was able to see, I don't know if I can talk about it specifically, but just exotic eggs that have never been hatched by anybody else in a
Yeah.
controlled setting. So being able to see some of those was really insightful and applicable to this scenario. But also relating to that, I mean, when you work in an aviary setting with so many different species of birds, you not only see how they're different between species, but how certain individuals have personalities. And that obviously has applied to our poults as well. I feel like I know them so well, and our bond has matured over time. You know, we now have birds that are 3 days old, and my eldest birds are 55 days old now.
Hmm.
So it's really incredible how every individual has a personality, and you can see that in every bird that you meet as you go through your career.
That's super cool. Um, we don't have to go into great detail on it, but this is something that I'm just now learning about that I find really intriguing, which is that incubation is triggered. And can you maybe real briefly talk about like how is the egg different before versus after onset of incubation and like what happens? What physically
Right.
changes?
So I know Marcus has already touched base on this in previous podcasts, I think. So the hen will essentially all of those eggs until she's ready to incubate are shelf stable, and she'll come and sit for a few hours to ensure that they remain fertile, but it isn't until that first day of incubation that she allows them to start developing, and then everything after that is incredibly crucial. So what's so cool about the turkey is the fact that they can be shelf stable for a certain amount of time. Um, and then after that point in time, you know, they just become increasingly more sensitive to any variation in their
Mhm.
care. So, of course, the humidity is one of those aspects that's very crucial. If it's too humid, they're not losing enough moisture quick enough, and that will affect their ability to absorb the yolk. If it's too dry, they're losing too much moisture, and that also affects their ability to obtain nutrients. And what is so interesting that we might be able to reveal in our egg monitoring information is that if these eggs have gone through major interruptions, is that possibly affecting the long-term outcome and success of that poult?
Mm.
All of those minute things can be so significant when it comes to the amount of nutrients that you can absorb in the egg and how consistent your development is in the egg to your life outside the egg.
Man, it just keeps stimulating more and more questions that I have, but I know we need to get to the meat and potatoes of this.
Yeah, no, I think we have such little information on that process. Like we know that
Yeah.
getting disrupted messes it up, but does that happen when she gets bumped off of a nest because a predator came by or somebody mowed through or like how long
Yeah.
or how much is that affecting things and you don't really even realize it because she may not abandon the nest but still have problems because of the incubation process being interrupted.
Yeah. Or how do recess activities affect it? That's something that came to mind for me.
Yeah, it certainly, I could see where that could matter, especially if you get them into a situation where they start recessing abnormally.
Right. Super interesting.
Yeah. Well, one thing that came to mind for me, Ava, and I don't know right off the top of my head because I'm not staying in touch with the data like you are. Uh, what you said that the oldest poults are 55 days old.
Mhm.
How big are they?
Our biggest male is now decently over 800 grams.
That's so 800 grams is 1.8 pounds.
Isn't that wild? You can barely hold him in 2 hands. So, our biggest bird is 838 grams, and the next in line in terms of size and possible dominance ranking is only 695.
So it's 25% bigger.
Wow.
He's an absolute beast. And then we also have a really interesting bird who creates such a interesting data set, which is Rocky. He kind of went through this period of being stunted during the study trial, and so we take extra good care of him. But because of that, he is only a quarter of the size of some of these birds, and he's only 188 grams. So it's really incredible how either how rapidly they can grow or how stunted they can be, and the fact that both of those birds are successful and have made it to this point in time in their own way. You know, some of them need a
That
lot of help, and some of them are just absolute beasts.
that is, I mean, incredible variation. Just
Uh-huh.
like the two biggest ones, even the difference in those two that's still tremendous.
Right. Yeah, that's Knight versus, the biggest bird from my group, who I call Yellowbird, and then it looks like the rest of our birds in that age range are between 400 and 600. So, when you compare him
Wow.
to even the rest of them, it's quite substantial, and
So
even
night is twice the size of the average from the brood, the clutch. Is that what you just said? Did I do that math right?
yeah, that looks
About right. That so the
Wow.
wow, that night is a beast.
yeah, he is. And surprisingly, he's pretty friendly, but just yesterday, this was so interesting to witness. Um, you know, their rate of displaying to each other has decreased over time because these same birds have been in the same group for a month or so now, and so they don't really have this need to continue to work out their social hierarchy. But yesterday I happened to be in there, and Yellowbird and Knight had a big fight.
Mm,
And I'm not sure that Yellowbird made any gains there, but looking at their size difference, that is just shocking that he would even dare
mhm.
challenge Knight.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yellowbird, I think is, you know, it's like dynamite. Big boom in a small package. He's relative to night.
He's pretty personable.
Yeah. I actually, last time I was in there, it was Yellowbird. I'm pretty sure that I got footage and I was enamored at that point. He was around 6 weeks old. Uh, but maybe you were in there with me and you confirmed that's who it was.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when I walked around the edge of the divider in the middle of the enclosure, Yellowbird was strutting, and you could see some of the adult feathers, those middle rectrices,
Mhm.
had already emerged, and I was just like, "Whoa, that's the first time I've seen that." So, I've got a little bit of footage of it, but uh, yeah, it is kind of well. You said several things that were interesting. One, you've noticed they decreased their displaying, but they're that far apart, and Yellowbird is still trying, sounds
Right,
like.
right. And then immediately after that, it seemed to have enticed, my Limebird to strut, and he just was going nonstop to anyone that would give him the time of day. That was really funny to see as well. We've got a lot of great footage of him being silly.
So, I'm curious, is there anything that you've noticed in Knight's behavior that would explain why he's so much bigger than everybody else?
You know, I actually don't have a lot of unique observations about him that would explain why he has become absolutely massive.
Yeah.
But something that I think is so interesting that we may be able to, and we should be able to kind of reveal these trends is, you know, does their degree of boldness correlate to their size? And what I've
Mhm.
noticed is that this can shift and change over time. So taking it back to when I was doing my study trial with my study brood, I had this one bird who I'm very confident she's a hen. She had a spiral poop. Her picture has been featured a couple times for that iconic poop. But I've also seen her strut. So I always perceived her as this dominant hen in that group of five. But as soon as she was heavier than the other suspected hen in my group. But as soon as she was introduced to this larger group of graduated birds, she immediately became very hesitant and shy.
Mm.
And she was never particularly close with me. She still avoids people, but I've noticed that she also avoids the birds. She's one of the few to rush in for the morning breakfast frenzy. And I can see that reflected in her size. She is one of the smallest in the group, despite being among the oldest hatched birds. And you can kind of see it's just incredible to know that she went from being bigger than the lesser dominant hen to being one of the smallest hens in the group because she's
Mhm.
not as bold. She's a bit more timid, and that has affected her. So I wonder, you know, as Knight continues to be bigger and bigger and bolder, you know, nobody's going to challenge him. He's going to stand in the middle of the food dish. He's always going to have that extra edge to get that much more food and continue growing.
Yeah, sort of like a positive feedback that's going to cause them to get more and more bigger than everybody else, or more and more different. You stimulated a thought for me as well, and maybe you remember, because I know that you have really intimate relationships with all the birds because you're out there constantly. One thing that was striking to me is I had the bird Blueberry, and Blueberry was the smallest in every weight measurement through the whole time, but I noticed, I think it was the second one after, so they'd been in, you know, out of their trials, graduated for about 2 weeks, they were about a month old. The second one, I noticed when you sent me the measurements that Blueberry was now the biggest out of my brood, and had been the smallest for all that time, and then after 2 weeks of being in that new context, was now all of a sudden weighing more than everybody else. So I don't know if that was a change in behavior or effectiveness as a forager or what, but that stuck in my head, like, wow, I was not expecting Blueberry to be the biggest.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they now live in very consistent conditions, they're not necessarily out in those foraging plots, they're primarily relying on our ecological food every day. It should lean towards, you know, behavioral aspects impacting that, maybe not so much foraging, because they don't have the same level of opportunity to forage a large population of, you know, bugs that are hopping in there. They're going to deplete that very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, on average, when a poult first hatches, do you know about what? In my head, it's about 50 grams, but what on average has been their size right when they hatch?
Yeah, it's usually between 50 and 60 grams, or the higher end of, you know, 48, 49.
Okay, so let's see, 50 grams. So Knight is not quite 20 times the size of at 50 something days.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, and their transformations are so rapid and so intense. You know, it's not just a bird going from getting larger in size and putting on muscle mass, it's that they're, you know, changing and molting every single feather on their body rapidly, you know, going from those tiny hair-like down feathers to having, you know, flight feathers, and then replacing those as they get even bigger. You know, all of their limbs are growing. It's like having a toddler who sleeps and eats and cries, and then 2 weeks later they're climbing a tree. It's just it's so impressive how they can just jump like that.
Yeah, that is remarkable. You know, we've been talking about Knight a lot, so I did have another question that is related to our conversation. Was he always the biggest? Was he biggest out of the egg, or did it change at some point? And if so, when?
Let me check real quick and then answer that, because I have the data.
So for the audience and Will, we do have measurements basically from the time that they were in the egg all the way till now. So we've had really detailed growth information on every individual.
Yeah, I wonder if even his egg was bigger.
Yeah, I can't tell you the exact weight of his egg, but what I can tell you is that he certainly was not our heaviest hatched poult. That was Bigfoot. So he Knight hatched at 56 grams when he dried off, and there were birds that we suspect are hens that, you know, were 60 grams. So he didn't necessarily have that immediate leg up on anyone.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But at some point, he turned on the growth factor and just started running away with it.
Yeah, he certainly was a notorious strutter. I recall, and obviously we have so many videos of him and Yellowbird, you know, facing off. So that may have, paid off for him in the end because he just never gave up,
So that footage that we have shared of the two poults that were, I think it was your plot. Is that those two birds?
The 5-day-old birds that are in the plot, that was my yellowbird and my limebird, but we also have footage that everyone has seen of specifically night strutting as well.
Yeah. So interesting. The growth rate on these things, man.
I'm still just thinking about what she said a second ago, the Notorious Strutter. I think that could be our new rap band name, Marcus.
That's a good one.
The Notorious Strutters.
We should title this podcast episode The Notorious Strutter.
And it's so crazy how, like, now when you go and see night, it stands out. Every single person who walks into that enclosure with those birds, it points out him specifically. So at this point, it's just crazy how he surpassed everyone. But way back when he was such a notorious strutter, you couldn't necessarily tell him apart from the others. Yeah.
That's funny. I don't know if Will realizes it, but Will pointed out night whenever he walked into the enclosure and
Did I really?
Look at that bird.
Did I really?
Yes.
You can't miss it.
That was the one you pointed at first.
That was, I think I remember being confused about how many age classes were in that pen because he was like in a league of his own.
Yeah, he was so much bigger, and I said, no, that is our biggest one.
Yeah. That's funny. I was a little bit worried when Ava said that I had missed night, and I hadn't pointed him out, and I'm like, God, I'm so unobservant.
That was the first thing you did because you're confused. He's so big. I don't know if we're ready to go to this part of the conversation yet, but I think there's also some consequences coming with that because I think Knight was also one of them that started balding first. I know several of them had been balding, but it may be Yellowbird that I'm thinking of, but I think it was one of those that I noticed it on myself first.
Yeah, it's so funny to see too, because
but when I saw it for myself, it was one of those two. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and I could notice it a little bit when I was there the other week, and it's hilarious looking.
It's so funny. They are definitely, in their appearance, their awkward teenage phase, as well as their personalities. I would say our most notorious balding bird is my limebird. He was the first to start losing feathers on the back of his head, and I thought something was wrong with him. And then I realized
he's got like a mite or something.
Suit. But yeah, they're still so cute. Yellowbird is balding in the front now. So yeah, I'm not sure there's any correlation between how dominant they are or necessarily how big they are. Maybe it's just an individual.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking maybe just the males are first, or
yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any, nothing stands out to me as far as the hens losing any head feathers.
Yeah.
Wait, so when you said that, do you mean that the hens haven't started doing that, or you haven't noticed anything different from the males?
I don't have any memories of hens balding, so I think they might not really be doing it as rapidly as suspected males.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. The males bald first.
Checks out.
Well, yeah, for folks that are listening, take a minute and go watch this because it is hilarious.
Yeah.
The footage of them balding,
Well, saying it's the awkward phase is hilarious because I think about, everybody I feel like has a story about having a bad haircut around the time you're in middle school, and that's like where they are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also with their personalities, Marcus, you did a great job at making this exact noise, but they have this don't touch me noise. Like, I'll stand next to you, Mom, and we can hang out, but don't try to pet me. And they use it every single time. I think it's so funny how they'll want to come hang out, but you got to keep your respectful distance because they don't want to cuddle you. They'll communicate that. They're super clear with their communication, which I find to be super impressive.
Well, question related to that, but also the balding. At what age did you start noticing the balding? Do you remember?
Oh goodness. It was several weeks ago, so maybe 1.5 months old.
Okay. So you think somewhere in the 4 to 6 week range, probably.
Yeah, and that also would correlate with, like, they can thermoregulate on their own. They're perching up on the perches at night independently. It's kind of like a developmental milestone, it seems.
Mhm.
So one thing I was actually did these little selfie recordings every day while I was out there, just because I knew I'd see things and reflect on it right then and forget it. But one of the things that I noted in one of them that I listened to that I had forgotten was that overnight their voices started changing. Like I could hear that they were no longer they no longer had the little classic peep.
Mm.
It started becoming more like a
Yeah.
whatever that sound is called that birders do. But you started hearing that hoarseness in their peeping and stuff. So is that when you were talking about their communication? Have you seen some sort of progression in their voice changing like that?
Yeah, they certainly use certain noises more now than they did in the past. There are certain things they've just completely stopped using. Like, I haven't seen them use the lost call in the longest time. I think because they're pretty confident and comfortable where they are. They don't need me every single moment of the day. So that's something they don't do anymore. They started doing what I call a little clucking noise. I think it might have a different terminology for people who hunt and kind of know the names of the calls a bit better, but they started doing that at a pretty significant,
So
uh
is that just like an abrupt? You're talking about just like an abrupt single note?
yeah, it
I'm
sounds like
just
a cluck.
dying to ask y'all to recreate these sounds.
Oh god, I wish I could, but yeah, it's pretty much sounds like a cluck. Some people have told me it sounds similar to their yelping noise, but, what I've noticed is that, they're always content, so they're always trilling. That's something that they've carried over from their time as little itty bitty babies, is that they trill all day long and they're always talking, but some things they have dropped off using and other things, they began using more frequently.
Yeah, I think I noted with the trill, like, to me, that's gonna eventually become a purr.
Mhm.
Like, it's just gonna get it's sorta like a really high pitched and really fast version of a purr. But, uh, I just being around turkeys as a hunter, I kinda have the same perception of them, and I hear people talk about this that are around them a lot, is that they are always making noise.
Mhm.
But they have a bunch of soft things like that trill right now that I suspect will eventually be a purr. And the cluck, not that's a little more deliberate, but one other thing that I have heard them doing constantly is whining, and it
Mhm.
already sounds like an adult bird's whine.
That's super interesting. Have you been able to isolate, I mean, because that example that you used earlier of the "I wanna hang out with you, but don't touch me," communication, that's, like, really specific, right? Have you noticed anything else, that any other vocalizations that are that specific?
Um, yeah, they're alert. I mean, everybody
Mhm.
is familiar with that, the "put, put, put."
Yeah.
That's so iconic. It's one of my favorite things that they do, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
I hate it. As a turkey hunter.
Well,
Fair enough.
there's also, you saw this, Will, when you were there. Um, there's a putt that is like, oh shit, I'm gonna get eaten.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a different kind of putt that's like, back off, like, I don't wanna get injured.
Uh-huh.
Then there's another one like, what is this new thing here? I don't know what to think about this.
Yeah.
More of a curiosity, like, I don't know what to think about this thing.
I picture them being in kinda like a statue pose when they do that, and they're kinda extended
Yeah,
out,
it's like
like, "I'm not sure, I smell a rat."
well, I don't know if you recall, but it was raining while you were I know you remember that part, but,
Yeah.
it was raining and the girls had an umbrella and had set
Uh-huh.
down outside. It wasn't in there with us,
Yeah.
and it wasn't even really that close.
Yeah.
But everybody all the turkeys were walking around, and they got over on that wall, and one of them noticed the umbrella
Mhm.
outside that didn't they'd not seen anyone before. and they started doing that
Yeah.
curiosity type. It wasn't a super aggressive putt, but they were like, something's not right. What is that thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love seeing them investigate things because it's always that response. It's
Yeah.
I'm standing as far away as possible, but I'm getting my eye as close as I can. Investigate.
Yeah, I just imagined like those cartoons where the eye bulges out. It does
That's
kind of
funny.
feel like that.
Yeah, and it takes them so long to acclimate to foreign things, and this is something we had to employ during trapping season is just allowing them to have that acclimation period. But even when it comes to husbandry and we're trying to get, new perches in their enclosure, they don't even trust those. You'll bring a branch in and they all alert at it and they investigate it, and then they don't touch it for 3 days because they're like, "What is this weird thing? Like, I don't trust that."
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't right.
Well, that is so interesting to think about how the tone of a putt can convey different meanings. And, that lends credibility to people that say that, different yelps with different tones and different intonation have different meanings as well. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. We've talked about this, trying to measure some of these things because we have opportunity to sort of explore their dialect, right? I mean, there could be some really interesting stuff that we could try to iron out experimentally with a population like this.
Yeah, and on the level of recognizing certain noises, in particular, one of the things that I've noticed is people always ask me, like, "Do you really think that they believe you're the mother hen?" And I think the answer is definitely yes, because
Mhm.
they're certainly all familiar with human presence, but when certain birds hear certain voices, they have
Yeah.
different reactions. I've had a bird in my lap that's relaxing with me, but it hears the person over the speaker playing to the incubation eggs, it hears their mother's voice, and then they suddenly wake up from a nap. So, they're really in tune with specific noises and specific people, so their communication is so unique, and they understand each other so well. I wish I could, like, be able to fully understand their language, it's incredible.
Yeah. Do you think they recognize each other based on vocalizations only? I mean, obviously they use the visual cues too, but I wonder, like, if you were able to take away the visual cues, if they could recognize each other. I mean, and what prompted that question is I saw the same thing that you're talking about when I was out there, depending on, because I think there were 3 different people total who had raised broods while we were out there, and depending on who was talking and where they were, like the specific poults that they had raised would move in
Yeah,
that direction.
I remember us even talking about that
Yeah,
when we were in the one that my brood was in.
yeah,
Brielle was in it before, which her
yeah,
was also in there, and her brood were all around her, and mine were kind of over in the corner hanging out. And then we switched places where I ended up inside, and Brielle had walked out of the enclosure, and all the poults switched places where all mine were around us, and all of hers were over in the corner, kind of hanging out.
yeah,
So definitely, things like that resonate. That they are viewing people differently, and I have seen similar things to what you just described, Ava, with the voice patterns, which would make me think they probably do recognize each other based on voice. At least they seem to be very easily doing that between the human voices, which that may be, people may be thinking, well, obviously they can tell my voice from Ava's voice really easily.
mhm,
But should they be able to tell my voice from Will's voice really easily? I mean, you know, it, I feel like for something that doesn't speak, like just think about doing that for somebody that speaks a different language.
yeah,
Becomes incredibly difficult for me to hear differences in people's voices when they're speaking a different language
yeah,
compared to if they're speaking the one I do. So, and I also, there are some obvious examples with hens, where we've all talked about this as hunters, where you have hens that you can hear they have different voices from one
right,
another. But I wonder about just subtle ones, like they all sound like a classic hen, but maybe to each other they have very distinct voices.
Yeah. I mean, you think about if they can recognize us, they're not even evolved to differentiate us, right? Like that's not what they're queuing on, but they can still do it. So it makes me wonder, like, what's the depth and breadth of their understanding of each other's vocalizations and specific voices?
I bet they can tell it. I mean, I would put money on they can tell each other apart
Yeah.
because 'cause they're just so incredibly observant in everything that they do. I find it amazing that they can visually recognize each other when they're super small and they don't have a lot of distinct differences, they know who is the male and who is the female already, and we would be none the wiser. So, they're incredibly observant, and I think that works to their benefit.
Man, it's so interesting to think about that in the context of hunting, isn't it, Marcus?
Yeah, we can't help it.
I know. I know. I'm just thinking, like, as soon as you make a call, like, you're putting, depending on their mood, you're putting some of those birds on edge because they don't know who you are. And it makes sense in a, like, you've seen probably, Marcus, as much as I have, like in a heavily hunted population, there are instances where you can see a bird and you make like a one note call at it, like a cluck, and they leave. It's like that's all it takes for them to know. It's like, oh, well, if I don't recognize that bird, I'm not going to it.
Yeah. Well, also makes sense why you might want to cycle through,
Yes.
and you find one that they like today.
Yeah.
I also have thought about this a lot when, kind of marrying this with our movement data. There also definitely is a lot of mixing going on. Like there are birds immigrating in and out of areas constantly. I
Mhm.
didn't really realize to the extent until this year when we had, hundreds of or almost 200 birds tagged. Uh, some of them are moving so far, like to the degree where we can't even find them,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden they show up again. You know, so I also wonder about that. Like there has to be some flexibility in that where they don't necessarily freak out if somebody new is in town because that's
Yeah.
probably happening a lot
Mm. That makes sense.
based on their movement data. It is so yeah, really interesting. Well, Ava, what else has stuck out to you that you think people would like to hear about?
Mm. Well, keeping on the topic of communication specifically, I have some more interesting anecdotes, and some things that I really hope we might be able to pull out from our data or could investigate in the future. And it does relate to behavior and how intentional the turkeys are with everything that they do. And also taking it back to strutting, I've noticed, and I don't know if you notice this as well, Marcus, but when you have birds displaying to each other, there's a couple of options that they could use to de-escalate that situation. They can possibly leave and walk away. They can continue to face off. They can submit. Or my favorite response is via preening. So
Mm.
they'll choose to, and I think, submission versus turning your head around and preening is a very interesting and deliberate choice, and they mean
Mm.
different things. So I find it so amazing that they have these couple of options, and what exactly does that mean when they're doing that? Because I would argue, when you turn around and preen, you're kind of de-escalating and saying, or are they possibly saying, like, "Hey, we were just playing. This is not so serious. Like, I'm not letting you win, but I'm not really playing with you anymore." And it's just like a gentle take me down versus, "Hey, are we actually figuring out what our hierarchy is right now? Is this a serious face off? And what is the actual outcome versus is it neutral? Has a decision been made? And when and why they choose to have different reactions and responses to each other, and something that can be so crucial to, how big they're able to get and how dominant they may or may not be. So I just find it again, taking it back to their level of communication and how clear they are with each other is just incredible.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Like, that's immediately what came to mind for me when you said that. Is that to me would signal we're not going to do this right now, but I'm also not telling you that you're dominant. Like, this isn't settled, but this isn't the time. That's kind of what came to mind for me. But the other thing that came to mind, and I experienced this in other ways with other behaviors and things, is I'd always wonder, how does everybody know? Like, they just all know what stuff means.
Yeah.
They all just came out of the egg knowing what to do in all these situations.
Yeah, it's
Like, isn't
crazy.
that weird?
They're just on a different level of being able to understand and perceive each other, and I know there are so many people who understand turkey calls super well, and obviously we have all studied their behavior and witnessed it firsthand, but they're really, that's why I keep saying I think they're so incredibly observant because they don't need to, like, hash this out a million times to understand where they stand. Um,
Mhm.
so they're paying very close attention. And that applies to people as well. And they have, I really feel like sometimes they have specific experiences with their mother hen that they carry and that changes them for the future. Like there are certain birds where you have a once in a lifetime opportunity to bond with them, and then you notice that that actually changed them. So I have one bird who, she wasn't very personable. And then one rainy day, I noticed that she looked kind of tired and cold, and I bring her up to my face even though she's 20 days old, and I cuddle her for the first time in several weeks. And then after that point in time, everybody says how incredibly friendly she is.
Hmm.
So, I take that again anecdotally as like we've really shared a special moment, and that impacted the way that she interacts with me specifically, as well as has kind of just made her a more friendly individual.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that
I mean, you got yeah, I mean, you gotta think that they have some memory, but that level, I guess, is a surprise to me.
Yeah, and it really stands out in my mind because I so distinctly remember after that point in time, she was never like that before, but now she's one of the birds who she wants to stand next to you. She'll jump up into your lap. If you're there long enough, you can actually pet her, and that's a very distinct from the other birds. So
Mhm. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I think we have almost no work on this, but I find really really interesting. Uh, I would really like to see what their capabilities are from a memory standpoint. Like,
Mhm.
does does she actually remember that, or is it like there's things that have impacted us from our childhood that we don't necessarily even remember happened, right?
Mhm.
But it still has shaped the way that we behave or think or whatever. And I wonder, is it that kind of situation where you had that moment and that like sort of told her, oh, these humans are pretty cool. I should, you know, interact with them more. And now she doesn't even remember that, and she just interacts with them more.
She just does, yeah.
Yeah, like it just became part of her behavior. Or, you know, is she actually thinking back, you know what? That time I was cold, she hooked it up, warmed me up, and I like
right.
now we're good.
Yeah, we can't know for sure, but I definitely think that, certain birds go through personality shifts, and we could never concretely say, but um, you kind of can feel that bond in certain situations. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do think that would be a really interesting line of work is to try to figure out what are their capabilities from a memory. I mean, even from a hunting standpoint, you hear this all the time, Will, that people are like, well, they know every leaf and branch,
Yeah,
everything in their whole home range.
yeah,
Is that real? Like they know there's a new bush on that tree over there? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
what is the extent of their memory and how long does that last? Is
yeah.
that, like an elephant where they can remember it 100 years? Or, no, obviously they don't live that long, but like, are they remembering things their whole life? Or is that like, that happened today and I forgot about it tomorrow?
Mhm. Yeah. In your experience, how can you do you have any basis for comparison regarding the level of intelligence in turkeys compared to other birds? Like, have you been around enough other species of that age?
I haven't been around a lot of neonatal birds.
Yeah.
What specifically about turkeys I find so interesting is that I think they're underrated. I think a lot of people overlook how intelligent they are. Let's see. Other birds and level of intelligence.
A lot more, I would think a lot more complexity to their social dynamics than some other species.
Yeah, they certainly are. I mean, because they're such a social bird, it is complex.
Well, it's so hard to work out. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, with other species that I've been around and interacted with and observed, like I mentioned, they might have personalities and quirks, but I've never quite seen any other type of bird be so intentional in the way that turkeys are. So I would say they're very intentional, they're very observant, and there are other intelligent birds out there, but because of, how social they are, it creates a really unique, what's the word I'm looking for? Really unique personality that you'll find in any given turkey.
Yeah, I guess the degree of their individuality is higher than some other species, you could say.
Well, I was going to say it's so hard to work out. Like I'm thinking of all these examples and hearing the stuff that you're sharing, Eva, and I'm trying to work out. Okay, is that actually a form of intelligence, or is it like part of their innate weariness? Like are they just genetically programmed to be observant of everything, or you know are they learning to like I guess that's what I'm coming back to. What degree are they learning to to adapt to their situation versus it being just like an innate capability?
Yeah, I would say so much of what they do is innate. And I know you and Kelly have talked about like trying to teach the poults to hunt specific or show them specific bugs and allow them to realize that, hey, this is a really good food source. But for me personally, during the trial, there were so few things that I taught them how to do. Really, the only thing was I taught them how to drink. So I really do think their instincts are carry them pretty far. And then their ability to observe works to their benefit, but I really think they have incredible instincts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I would like to push on a little bit with the learning part of it, and then how you can also during that same process get at some of the memory capability and that sort of thing. But going back to when we were talking about the vocalizations, I mean, with humans, we learn language, and you can learn, depending on where you're born and what language is spoken, you can learn different kinds, right? There are plenty of examples where people did not have that opportunity early in life and didn't learn to speak or didn't learn a language. And then I think about them, like they just come out of the egg and everybody knows to putt when they see something that's not right. And we also have, these broods, some of them never met each other, right? They didn't learn it from somebody else. They just all knew to do that. So it is remarkable. Like there are definitely some things that are just like part of the scaffolding, right? Like this is what it means to be a turkey when you come out of the egg.
Yeah.
And they need no learning, but then, there are other examples that are kind of abnormal, like the drinking, where, they may not be programmed to do that specific action, but they are programmed to know they need water.
Yeah, I guess. Go ahead, Eva.
I was just gonna say it is it's an interesting combination because sometimes when one bird alerts to something, it will attract the other ones, and maybe this comes down to again those really fine scale details of what single tone of putt versus a different tone of putt, and which one allows them to call over the other birds and show them something versus I've also noticed sometimes one individual will putt at something and it doesn't attract the other birds. So again, there's just those minute details that we probably cannot hear, but sometimes do turn into like, one bird is learning from another one using the information that we know what this noise means. But when I say it in this tone, hey, it's actually serious, you should come over here. Or like, oh, that guy's ridiculous. I don't know why he's alerting to that piece of grass,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I've been guilty in the past because they are so instinctual, that I've thought, they're a pretty simple animal in the sense that they kind of come out with this set of instructions hardwired, and it's just like they have a handful of vocalizations and a handful of behaviors, and then that's it. But now some of the adaptability or the plasticity that you're talking about is challenging that for me now, So it's fascinating.
Yeah, they all come out with the rule book, and then they kind of make their own rules as they
Yeah.
go along with each other, and, yeah, it's amazing how it's so tied to their social network.
Yeah, there's been so many examples of things like, I think I mentioned something related to this, but it kind of has stuck with me as well. They had a particular set of vocalizations when they find something really good to eat. But at least in the first several days, I just was kind of struck by this that everybody knew to do the same sort of sound,
Mhm.
like to the degree that I know, oh, they caught something good over there, but nobody else responded to that. So everybody knows to do that, but nobody actually responded and knows to run over there and try to steal it. And then my great purple banded bird was the first one that kind of started taking an interest in what everybody else was doing and became my quote unquote mischievous bird. Uh, but that was a kind of a different kind of example where everybody had the blueprint. They all know that's what you do when you find a mole cricket, but it also didn't seem to be attracting everybody. Like they all have thought through, oh, that means somebody else found the mole cricket. I need to go try to steal it. But that changed pretty quickly, later in the trial. So it seemed like they learned that was the response. So it's really confusing to try to work through because it's so complex.
Well, and it's also kind of surprising that they wouldn't be more selfish and not vocalize when they find something,
Yeah.
because it turns into a rabbit chase every time.
Yeah. When that's what I kind of thought from Blueberry is Blueberry always had everything stolen from her, so she never vocalized at all, and she was always over by herself. She
Yeah.
found a lot of
So
stuff.
she did decide to take that
That's
strategy.
what it seemed. I mean, it may just be variation,
Yeah.
not of like there was definitely a lot of variation in how vocal mine were, and I assume with everybody's that was the case. But I don't know, it's just a really intriguing time, and we're getting to live in the middle of it, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed the older birds, if they find something good, they take it off in secret. They're not gonna announce
So
that.
they don't, yeah,
Yeah.
they stopped announcing it.
Nice. Good for them.
Sounds like Knight's strategy is just go stand in the middle of the food
Yeah.
bowl.
For night, you just stand inside the food dish, and nobody can do anything about it.
Yeah, who's gonna move it? What you got? Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've even seen them, like, tilt the food dish toward themselves, like, they'll stand on the one end so they can have
Yeah,
it
just get it all.
facing them. It's ridiculous, they're so greedy.
Well, the other thing when you start talking about food, it gave me another example that has stuck with me. Like they just all know not to eat fuzzy caterpillars, and they all know not to eat lover grasshoppers, and
Mhm.
they don't have to be taught that. They just know not to do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Because it's so wild that there are some things that they just come out knowing that
Yeah, it's
to
incredible.
me seem like complex,
Mhm.
thought. But
Right.
Yeah,
so
like,
it
how
makes
do
it
they
really
just
hard to work out which it is. Sorry, go ahead, Ava.
No, I mean, I know that so many different animals, they recognize that like bright coloration means toxic, but it's just incredible that like what's going through their head when they see specific critters that they know are bad. Is it anything more than the fact that they might be brightly colored, or do they have like this almost catalog of suspicious items to avoid? One of the things apparently they didn't realize is that you shouldn't stand in a fire ant hill. For the first time the other day, I saw one of my birds go walk right in it, yellowbird, and I mean, just to tease him, it was pretty funny of him jumping around and trying to like shake him off, and I had to help him get a few. But yeah, hilariously, they didn't quite know about that.
Did he eat any, or did he just try to shake them off? What?
I didn't notice that he was over there until he started jumping around, so I'm not sure if he was attracted because he went to eat them, or if he's just like me and didn't realize that it's an anthill and you're standing in it. Yeah.
It sounds just like my 5-year-old.
Yeah. They're so silly.
Yeah. Well, there are a few people that comment this all the time online, so there are a lot of people that think fire ants have led to the demise of ground nesting birds.
Oh, I mean, actually on that point, fire ants they can kill young birds for sure. I think it's quite crazy, taking it back to, I talked about this at the very opening, when I was working on an American kestrel project, we would have cases where those birds are obviously cavity nesters and they're stuck where they are. If fire ants find you, they can kill you and cause deformities and all of that. So really, yeah, it's a shame that some of these young animals do have to deal with them because they're pretty intense.
I think we talked about it, Will, on the air. One of my poults got bitten by an ant early. It was like the day 4 or 5 in the trial, and it ran around vocalizing, kind of erratic and not hunting for a while.
Wow. Do you know how many bites it got, or
no?
No way to tell.
An ant on the
poult,
and it was like in the web of its foot, and it was preoccupied with that for a while, and it was kind of like not behaving like it should be. It wasn't foraging, it was being erratic, and it was also being loud. And I just could see where that could be a problem.
Yeah.
And it, stuck with me.
Not good news. Yeah, I mean, you think about a predator being within an earshot of that. I mean, that's a dinner bell.
Sure, yeah, big distraction.
Yeah, so I know that fire ants can cause problems for some species, but I had kind of dismissed that for poults because they could just eat the ants. I mean, they might accidentally stand in the anthill, but it's not going to kill them. But in that case, it could definitely make them more vulnerable.
Sure.
Did you notice anything like that with Yellowbird, where he was noticeably distracted? And
yeah, he was certainly distracted for quite a few minutes, and I think he couldn't quite, because they're so tiny, he couldn't quite find them on himself, and he was trying to like get his band off and clean a little bit, and you know how fire ants are, they'll bite you for a second and then stop and bite you again, and then you're startled by that. So it certainly was distracting him for a couple of minutes, and I can totally see how that's an opportunity for somebody to come in and take advantage of that situation. And after that, he's pretty avoidant, but strangely enough, the other birds are walking around, and some of them were going over to the anthill, and I was like, don't stand there. Did you not just see that? Like, you're gonna get bit. So
some of us have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, he was too distracted to turn it into a learning opportunity for the other birds. So they'll have to...
Now we're back to their intelligence again. Everybody goes and stands in the anthill.
I was like, y'all. Yeah.
Oh man, this is so fun. I'm fascinated by all this, and I'm just learning so much. I'm appreciative of you, Eva, and your work, and that you're dedicating so much of your life to this stuff, because I think it's going to continue to open up a bunch of doors. I mean, there's so many things that Marcus and I have discussed since he opened this facility that, we just never would have thought about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an incredible feat, and I'm really proud of everybody on our team, very proud of myself and what I've been able to do, and it takes a very serious level of dedication. I think it's incredible that we not only might be able to discover some amazing trends in this data that could help the species, of course, but even taking it down to the level of so many opportunities we've taken from 100% failure to success, hens that have, of course, risked their lives and died as a result of, trying to give these eggs a chance, and we're able to raise them. I mean, it's just an incredible privilege, and I take that very seriously. So, there's so many different aspects of what we can achieve through this, and each of us are so dedicated to making sure that they're happy and healthy.
Yeah, glad y'all are doing it.
Yeah, it has been a fun thing to watch all the, I mean, most of the team were not real turkey enthusiasts specifically, but now you can see it. Like this experience has changed everybody to, really care for the species and conservation and everything. So it's been fun to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the dedication, there's no question that it's taken a lot of dedication from a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. That's incredible.
Well, did we miss anything, Eva? Anything that you want to share or leave the audience with?
Yeah, I feel like that was a good closing note. It's just that, we all are super dedicated to this. It shows. And I think everything we've been able to learn and collect, whether that's anecdotally or, via this plethora of information that we have, is really going to make an impact. It's something that I'll never forget for like the rest of my life, and I'll be able to carry this through my career. And it's just really a great time.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have to revisit because things are changing so fast. We could probably do it in a few weeks and have a completely new conversation about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And if this, of course, we plan to continue this on for possibly years to come, it'll be so exciting to see these birds into maturity and, will their personalities change? Will night be the biggest forever, or will yellowbird be a major contender? Like, it's kind of like an exciting journey that we're on here.
It's like a soap opera.
Yeah, I feel like yellowbird's gonna sneak in.
I feel like you're leaving us with a teaser for the end of a TV series. It's like,
exactly.
Will night continue to dominate? Or
for sure.
Yeah,
that's so fun.
Yeah,
awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming to do this. Thanks everybody out there for listening. We really appreciate it. If you guys want us to continue down the poult road, we're happy to do that. We're like 4, 5, 6 episodes in now focused on that, but people are saying they want to keep hearing about it, and I think that's a testament to how novel this is, the information that's coming from it. And thank you, Eva, for coming on and sharing your knowledge and for everything you've done for the project and for turkeys. So I think everybody appreciates that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was super fun.
Thanks, Eva. Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.